Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, it's Mark Graban. Welcome to episode 408 of the podcast. It is April 7th, 2021. Our guest today is Katie Labedz. You'll hear more about her in a minute. To get links and show notes and more, you can go to leanblog.org/408. And again, I want to thank our sponsor, Stiles Associates. We are joined today by Katie Labedz. She is author of the new book, newly released. It's called How to Improve Absolutely Anything: Continuous Improvement in Your Home, Office, and Family Life. So, Katie, thank you for being here today. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Great, Mark. How are you? Thanks so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it. Excited to be here today to talk about my new book.
Yeah, well, it would be good. We're going to learn more about your background. We're going to talk about the book. And then one other thing I just saw recently, Michigan is my home state, so I always follow closely what the Michigan Lean Consortium is doing. There's some news. I'll let you share it if you want to talk about that real quick.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I greatly appreciate it. So I have recently been named the chair of the Michigan Lean Consortium. I'm very excited about that. I grew up in Michigan also, so it's close to my heart, though I live in Wisconsin currently. So Michigan Lean Consortium, what we do is we help to promote continuous improvement practices and lean thoughts in the state of Michigan to help the Michigan economy thrive and help people to continue to grow and spread the good news about lean and continuous improvement. Yeah,
we can do the hand thing for the audience. I grew up in Livonia outside of Detroit. How about you?
For me, I grew up a little bit higher up here. I grew up in Flint, near Flint. Actually, I went to, grew up in Clarkston. My parents live in Grand Blanc right now. So yay to anybody that went to Bishop Foley High School in Madison Heights or graduated from Oakland University in Rochester. So that's where my background is.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad we have those Michigan connections. I'm sure we have a lot of listeners from Michigan, considering the amount of lean activity that always has been going on there and continues to happen in the great state of Michigan. So congratulations, or thank you for taking on that leadership role with the MLC. And I'll make sure there's a link to their website in the show notes.
Thanks so much. Yep, michiganlean.org.
Great. So, Katie, before we talk about the book, I do like to ask guests about their lean origin story. When did you first get introduced to lean? How and where did it resonate with you, to really kind of stick with you through your career this way? What's your story?
Oh, thanks for asking, Mark. My story is an interesting one. So my background is in IT. So I went to school for a management information systems degree and started my professional career. And I was tapped on the shoulder by two individuals. I used to work for Jabil, so largest electronics manufacturer in the world. And two individuals there saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And they tapped me on the shoulder and they said, "Hey, we'd love you to join this Greenbelt class." And I said, I don't think so. I've done enough math, right? So if anybody has an IT degree, we do a lot of math. And I said, I'm done with statistics. I don't really want to do that. And they persisted, and it changed the trajectory of my entire career. So that changed my focus to one of lean and continuous improvement. So obviously I got my green belt, moved on to my black belt, and I have my master black belt. So never turned back. But the area of specialty for me is helping those in non-manufacturing. So IT, HR, finance, legal, healthcare, et cetera. That's my specialty. And I'm able to do that because I've been in manufacturing and I have the background in non-manufacturing. So,
yeah. So when you was it back in IT, or was there a moment where lean really grabbed you, where you realized, okay, this is not just something you're being maybe, at some point forced to learn, but it's become a passion and something that's really important to you. Was there a moment, or was it an evolution?
I think there was definitely probably a moment when I was doing my initial green belt and black belt projects, where number one, it reinforced my love of data, and number two, realizing that the data that you have is telling you the story, and you just have to pay attention to the story in order to be able to solve your problems. And I think a lot of times we don't do that. And in one of my projects, my earlier lean projects, it was like this solution is so obvious, and we never looked in that particular direction before. So it was exciting to be able to say, hey, look, I'm applying everything that I've learned, and I'm making things better for my employers and for my customers, and of course, for my employees and my team members. So that was really exciting. And, it ended up saving us money in the long run. And I've seen the evolution of that over time, and really, it's impactful even to you. You're a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, so you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do all these things and show people. But when the rubber hits the road and you're seeing savings of $4 million or so with other customers, that's really when, even for me, it takes me a step back to astonish me too.
So what are some key lessons or observations do you think, Katie, when you started working and focusing on areas outside of manufacturing? I think at one point in the book you referred something about the carpet walkers. Is that the phrase?
The carpet walkers.
How is this different when dealing with carpet walkers?
So first of all, carpet walkers, right? That's anybody that's not on the manufacturing floor. Well, the rest of us are called carpet walkers, if you've heard that term before. And it's different for us because in many regards, a lot of the technology or a lot of the books that you'll read, right, in the education that you may receive in lean and continuous improvement very much focuses on manufacturing. And the reason it's done that way is because a lot of times, you can make a change in manufacturing and walk by it the next day and notice, oh, wow, that's different. That's moved. That's updated. There's a new poster, or, this whole line is configured differently. In IT, HR, finance, you can't necessarily walk through somebody's department like that and be able to say, oh, wow, that report's running much faster now. So I think it's kind of the energy and the excitement that you get to be able to say, hey, behind the scenes, there is so much good going on. And then you eventually end up seeing that as it applies to your customers, right? So your customers start to notice that, oh, we don't have as much downtime, or 3 o'clock every day, our systems aren't just all slowing down at the same time. There have been improvements that have been made.
And what's sometimes called, I don't know why I'm stumbling over the phrase, or I'm hesitating over the phrase knowledge work, because I think, people who work on concrete floors, let's say in manufacturing, are also relying on knowledge. But when we think about, let me just call it office settings, I guess, or electronic work, the waste is a lot of times less visible. And right. What I hear you saying also is that some of the changes then are also less visible. I was wondering if you could share an example or just elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. There have been changes that I've worked with the customers that are extraordinarily impactful in how much time it's saving. And always the caveat, just like any other lean practitioner will tell you, Mark, and I'm sure you've told other people the same thing, right? This is about allowing you to have more time to do more value-added work, right? It's not about eliminating jobs. And that's not the focus whatsoever. From an IT standpoint, there are many instances where we've been able to implement automation, right? And automation is hand in hand, IT and lean and continuous improvement, where things have been done manually. Taken as an example, one report for somebody that was working on it, and it was driving this person nuts. It was all manual, right? And it took hours and hours. It took like 30 hours to complete. And we were able to automate that and it was less than a minute. less than a minute. There was error checking, there was automation, no manual lookup. Everything was in compliance to a standard they were trying to meet too. So it's extraordinarily impactful. You can also obviously apply that to HR. If you start and take a minute and look at, and I hear this same story often, how long does it take you to hire somebody? Right, especially now, right? So we have even had an evolution of that process. But, for some organizations, it can take 120 plus days to hire somebody. Once they have the posting listed and they've gone through the interview process, the decision afterwards is taking a very long time. It's taking weeks, even after the interviews are done, to make that call. So how can we improve on that process too?
Yeah, when things take that long, companies end up losing candidates if the process is dragged out. And if somebody is looking for a better job or needs a job to begin with, there are so many reasons to try to take waste out of that process, eliminating delays and not doing, I think eliminating that waste and those delays doesn't mean doing a sloppy job of hiring. It just means doing it more effectively, which is good for the company. It's good for that candidate. It's good for everybody involved.
Right. And then also being able to provide feedback, right? Especially if it happens to be an internal candidate. So if you have an internal candidate for a position and you choose to hire or not to hire them, you owe them that explanation, and so that they can continuously develop and improve.
So on that thought of improvement, there are many ways different people might define or try to summarize continuous improvement. You do so in your book. Again, the title there for the listener is How to Improve Absolutely Anything. How do you define continuous improvement, Katie?
It's a never-ending quest to make things better. It really is. And just when you think, oh, I've gotten it perfect, there's another opportunity for you to make it better again. So it's really just never sitting back on your laurels and saying, okay, it's good enough. Of course, you may need time to take a break and move away from that, but you can circle back around sometime from a different perspective and say, wow, I could have done that differently. Here's another opportunity for improvement. Or that can change as technology changes for us, right? I'm sure we've all seen that over the past year, where we have had to make improvements or continuous improvement part of our day-to-day activity, because it has been strange. Honestly, it's been strange for all of us. So how do we improve on something like a Kaizen event or a brainstorming event when we're not in person, right? We're not together. So how do we continuously improve that situation, and, finding technology and uses of different things to be able to make them happen?
So there's a couple aspects of what you said there I think we can delve into. One is the idea, like as you put it, never ending. Like I think there's sometimes this misunderstanding. I don't know. You can tell when somebody maybe is new to continuous improvement when they ask a question like, well, what happens when we get rid of all the low-hanging fruit?
Yes.
Like if we're going to use that analogy, I guess, right? Well, the tree continues growing and more low-hanging fruit appear. Like as we're evolving or innovating or doing new things, it seems like we're on the same page. It's never ending because new opportunities arise. Is that fair to say?
Right. And then also one of my favorite items in the book is talking about how much waste is in an average process, right? So when people think, oh, if I can just make this situation better and then walk away from it and never come back to it again, an average process, right, has 95% waste, which means there's endless opportunities for improvement. There's more opportunities for us to improve on everything every day. So when you take a look at that and say, oh my gosh, how can I make this process better until I do it again? And then, of course, that wraps up the PDCA concept too.
And it's funny to think about 95%, whatever that number might be. I agree with you. It's directionally correct. And, that often gets measured if we're looking at a value stream map of, that proportion of value added time to total time through a system, whether that's flowing through a factory or a patient coming through some sort of healthcare value stream. And I'm thinking back to lessons. I think this even goes back to things that Taiichi Ono wrote, of looking at the difference between like keeping everybody busy and looking at that versus focusing on flow. And I'd be curious if you can think of an example, maybe from a carpet dwelling kind of situation where everybody is busy, but yet things don't flow. How is it that everybody can be seemingly almost 100% utilized, but that flow ratio is 5%, or the waste component of the cycle time is 95% waiting? How is that, and what's an example that comes to mind?
Sure. I worked with a client, and their process for managing their internal orders and their internal quotes was all manual. And I'm talking paper and pen manual, right? So there's different levels there. And during that time, they didn't necessarily see that there was something I won't say there's nothing wrong with the process, right? So let's back up a second and make sure that we cover it's the process that's broken, not the person, right? So we all know that, but it's good to remind ourselves that it's not Sue's job that the process is moving slow or that it's manual, right? That's the process that they're following today. And walking through this process with them where they didn't necessarily see that there were opportunities for improvement because that's the way they've always done it. And we hear that quite often. And then when we start asking questions and saying, hey, what are opportunities for automation? How can we get rid of the manual process? All of these conversations with this particular client started happening at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And, people are in all stages of changes, right? And some are reluctant to change and some embrace it. Well, change got accelerated for them when we all went into lockdown. And that was completely new for them because they've always relied on paper and they're not used to being remote. So those things had to be put into practice immediately. So some of the changes you may have been on the fence on, guess what? We're doing them right now because we're not there together to be able to hand paper back and forth to each other. And it's been extremely successful for them. So they've taken they've drank the Kool-Aid, right? And they're following the process and they're continuously improving. They haven't said, oh, since we made this new screen, I can make I can just step away and it'll be all better. Now they're looking to say, well, wait a minute, we can even make it better than that.
And so there's that mindset again, that being driven to continuously make things better that comes up again. But I think it's interesting. You look at the concept of batching. Like the batches may be, again, like in manufacturing, very clear and hard to miss. In office work, maybe the paper batches are more visible than electronic batches. I'm curious if you can think of some cases where flow has been improved. Like you said, not blaming individuals. It's not a lack of effort, but it's the structure of the work. Where does batch reduction come to play in the types of settings you work in?
I'm glad you asked that question. I have a perfect example. So I worked with a group that in the finance department, just like any organization on the planet, right? In the finance department, speed is on their side. They need speed. They need to be able to close out the books at the end of the month. They need to be able to run their reports. So from an IT perspective, also, you see that surge in usage of the equipment, right? In the software and the hardware, et cetera, towards the end of the month. And then finally, somebody said, we have this many batches or this many reports being batched at the end of the month. And somebody finally asked and said, do we need all of these reports? So at the end of the month, there was a batch and they were 30 different reports are being run in that batch. And so we went back to finance and said, hey, can you take a look at these? These are all the reports that are running in a batch at the end of the month, which is causing significant strain. We were able to make the correspondence to the strain on the system and on the hardware, and take a look at them, see if you need them. Which ones of these do you use? Out of 30, guess how many they actually used?
Oh, wow. Okay. I was going to guess like 6, but yeah, 2. That's not terribly surprising.
No, it's not, because things evolve over time, right? And you need this report, and we thought we needed that report, or that person moved on to a different position. And I'm sure when you start your career, you don't remember. I mean, I never remembered after being at places for 5-6 years what I asked the first year when I came on board to automate. So that was really interesting. That was an interesting activity to be able to say, okay, now that's just one department. Right. And that was just one area. So what happens if we started to expand that out and say, hey, this department or that area or that site or this group or even down to this person, why are you having this being automatically run and taking resources away? Which it made a huge and significant impact also on the ability to be able to use resources more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's always good to step back and ask or do that check of, who is the customer for that report? Are they still using it? Maybe having a process over time. So it's not just the once a decade spring cleaning of the reports, but what's a more ongoing process for making sure that list doesn't just grow instead of ever being pruned back, I guess.
Or when you're about to get audited. Yes. No, that's not a good time to do that either.
Yeah. I mean, you're reminding me of a story. This was in a hospital laboratory. This was probably going back 12, 13 years ago. There was this printer, and every time I would walk by out in that lab space, it somehow caught my eye that it was always blinking and flashing that it was out of paper. And I think I made some comment about I notice it's always blinking. What kind of process can we put in place to make sure it gets loaded with paper? I assumed that these printouts were helpful and necessary information. And the response surprised me. They said basically, oh, well, no, that printer just churns out unnecessary paper backup copies constantly. And so we intentionally make sure that printer doesn't have paper. That was their workaround.
Well, that's
and there was an opportunity to get, it was a start. It was a workaround or a short-term countermeasure. Because unfortunately, they didn't have the ability, or it wasn't high enough priority to make the change to stop just churning out, wasting that paper. So this kind of waste pops up everywhere, it seems.
Sure does.
So Katie, one other thing you said that was really interesting is this idea of sometimes needing to take a break, and I think there's really something to be said for that. When we talk about continuous improvement, what do we really mean by continuous? And is there a point where if there's so much change happening, there's risk of it being overwhelming? Can you kind of share some thoughts in general, or even if there's a specific story about when taking a break or a pause is helpful, maybe to just stabilize things before then diving back into more improvement?
Absolutely. So first of all, when I'm working with a client, when we're talking about continuous improvement, and let's say we're working on a project, maybe we have a Kaizen event and we have some outcomes from that event. One of the things that I do like to remind them is that even if we are implementing our future state, we need to have that future state stable. And at a minimum, it has to be for at least a quarter, unless there is something time sensitive about it. So maybe you're working on a project now that you will engage with that or run with that project, that new future state in August. So it's all, time dependent on what's happening in your particular circumstance. And it also, like you said, it's good to take a break from it. So you've made things better. You've tried it out for at least a quarter and it's doing really well. That's fantastic. And then what I would suggest then is reviewing that after you've reviewed it for the first quarter, then come back to review it in either 6 months or to a year. It depends on your certain circumstance, depends on the situation, the problem that you're trying to solve. And then come back and use, the adage of fresh eyes, right? So when you come back, you're going to have look at it from a different perspective, even bringing in different people back to review it again, where it may not be super obvious to you right now, but somebody else will look at it down the line and say, why did they do it like that? So,
yeah. So maybe we can talk, let's talk more about the book now, Katie. Again, the title is How to Improve Absolutely Anything, Continuous Improvement in Your Home, Office, and Family Life. There you go. Thanks for holding it up. I have it on my Kindle, which isn't as fun.
It's not as fun, is it?
it's nice having the physical copy. So you've talked about IT settings, manufacturing settings, office and administrative settings. So then the book is focused on, as the subtitle says, home, office, and family life. So I love asking authors, we've already talked about some of your lean origin story. What was the origin story for the book?
The origin story for the book was I'm very blessed in my life, and I'm very grateful for all the blessings that I have. And one of the blessings that I have is I speak at conferences, right? Global conferences, local conferences, and I also do a lot of teaching. And that's probably the number one question is, what book would you recommend? And if somebody is just starting out on their journey, I wanted to be able to recommend a book to them that would be easily understood. And I teach based on the concept that if you can apply this at home, then you can apply this at work. And if you are able to nail 5S at home and you've got it down pat, it's much easier than for you to be able to go to work and apply the same concepts. So that's why I wrote their book. And I also wanted it, and Mark, you and I have read books and now written books, and some books that I'm talking about where you start to read it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a textbook and I should be in a college class right now reading it. No knock on college or college classes, but some of them are pretty dry. I've read many of them just as you have, and I couldn't relate to it in a way where I'm able to say, how would I actually use this concept in real life? Because if I can't explain it to anybody, then they're not going to be able to understand it either. So I needed to get it down to that level of here's how we do PDCA at home with laundry detergent. Okay, let's be real. Everybody washes their clothes, even if you go to a laundromat. Let's talk about how we can apply those concepts there, and then transition to how we can apply them at work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right. The book is written in a really nice conversational, story-based tone, which I think is really engaging. But I guess I should have asked first. I mean, so before the book even was, what led to the collection of stories of what you were applying in your own home with your own family. Like, do you remember some of the first examples where you started applying what you were learning at work in ways that were beneficial at home?
Well, sure. But, I don't always tell my husband that. So we apply these concepts, and I don't just so everybody knows, I don't stop my husband and say, Andrew, now we're going to practice PDCA, or, let's now do 5S in that particular area. So obviously I have all these concepts that, we've all known or read about. I have them all in my head all the time. And so I tell people the voice, the tone you hear in the book, that's the tone in my head. That's me talking to myself all the time when it comes to these concepts. But, really it's about, especially when you first come together, when you first get married to somebody or start dating somebody, and you complement each other in many ways. And then you kind of notice opportunities, right? And, it goes both ways. So my husband has definitely taught me a lot. He retired from General Motors, and GM's been doing lean and continuous improvement for a very long time. He worked on the manufacturing line. So a lot of those concepts in continuous improvement, we can both relate to. So I think the first one that pops out of my head, though, is what I talk about in the book is doing laundry. And my husband's retired, and obviously I work full time. I worked in corporate America for many years, and then started my own company, Learning to Lean. And back when I have to wear dress pants, right? Black dress pants to work are a staple. And he was doing the laundry for us. And I would hold up my dress pants and ask him, like, how do we get white stains all over my black dress pants, right? So, and it's this delicate balance, right? So you're not going to say, why are you doing that? You're ruining my clothes, to an investigation of why that was happening to begin with. So it leads to the first question I always tell everybody is, what changed? So what changed? Before we were doing laundry, we didn't have this problem. And then what are the possible, the root causes to this? And my husband, by the way, was very much determined that it was our fabric softener sheets. And
because that was a change.
That
different
was a
sheets
change,
now?
different
Okay.
fabric
Yeah.
softener sheets. He also didn't believe in them. So,
Mm.
so, but then it led us back to looking at the laundry detergent. And we were using Arm & Hammer baking soda laundry detergent, which inherently is white. If you cook, you know that. And it was leaving the white stains on the pants. So as soon as we ran out and tried a different laundry detergent, problem was solved. So that's probably one of the things that sticks in my mind the most is, there it is. That's PDCA. That's root cause analysis right there in real life.
And it goes to show, I mean, maybe it's less detectable sometimes at work. I mean, I would say this partly in jest, like he had an agenda. It's hard to do root cause analysis. He had this anti-dryer sheet agenda. So he gravitated to that as a cause, even if that maybe wasn't it.
That's right. And it happens at work. Like you said, this happens at work all the time. And I refer to it as problem solving paintball, right? So you have a problem and you have lots of people going, it's this, no, it's that, no, it's got to be this, no, it absolutely has to be that. When you haven't taken time to do a root cause analysis to really determine what's the root cause of your problem and what is noise, which is the rest of it.
Yeah. And, I think of a lesson, I'll give credit to Pascal Dennis when I had the opportunity to work with his group some years ago and learn from him and some other former Toyota people. Let's say using this laundry example, you could be talking about it in the laundry room or in the kitchen nearby. And let's say, your husband says, okay, well, I know. Well, why? And we talk through it. So I know the root cause. It's the dryer sheets. Like, well, one really invaluable lesson I learned from Pascal is like if we're in a conference room or even if we're talking about it in the shop floor, the real, let's say, the healthcare shop floor, when we talk about it, like at best we have a suspected root cause. And then we would go and implement a countermeasure, which might include eliminate the dryer sheets.
Right.
We haven't yet, we wouldn't say we know root cause, but then you could go do a load of laundry without the dryer sheets and then, guess what? There's still white residue. Right. Okay, we learned something. The root cause is clearly not the dryer sheets. And, so it makes me think of that lesson of, try to give that reminder to the listener. Because, I think there's this risk of a trap of, they said, well, we know the root cause. Well, why? Because we talked about it. And people get really fixated on that, and they don't want to then look at evidence that maybe points in a different direction.
Right. Even if that evidence is pretty strong. And, it kind of goes back to the definition, like we talked at the beginning of the podcast about continuous improvement. It's a never ending quest to make things better. But, it's also making sure that, we approach that with a logical and in a logical manner to be able to solve those problems. Right. It's also learning. Right. So that is so important. And, you hear people all the time, I've failed, or I've done this, or I've done that. And often I coach folks through that and say, it's okay, because you will learn something from this. All of my challenges and all of the things that I've been through in my life, I've learned something from it. Right. So I've either learned like, yes, this is a great way to approach it, or no, I'm not going to do that again. And it's okay. And I think many times we don't give ourselves as humans enough grace to be able to say, it's okay. I've learned that I really don't like this food, or I don't want to live here, or I don't want a job like that, or the next company I'm going to go to, I would like a different culture. There's nothing wrong with that, right? As long as you learn something from it.
Yeah. That's a great point. And so the book isn't, completely about laundry, because, as it say, as the title says, you can improve absolutely anything. But there's a section in the back of the book of practical tips and tricks. And I think on the one hand, it's good to teach people an improvement mindset and thought process that they can use to figure out their own problems. I think there is a time and a place, though, for sharing examples of improvement, because you can, as the late Norm Bodek would say, you can steal shamelessly. There's nothing wrong if somebody else has a countermeasure to a problem that you already also have. Go and try that countermeasure. And if it works, great, or you can build upon it. And so I think, there is something to be said for sharing those tips and tricks. But one that stood out to me as one I hadn't ever thought of is related to laundry. This idea of using a dry erase marker to write instructions on the dryer. I thought that was really clever because that enameled finish, it wipes off really easily. It basically is a whiteboard, right?
And you have your erasers, right?
Yeah.
Even if you didn't have an eraser, you can use your fingers, right? Or Kleenex or an old dryer sheet and wipe it off.
Oh, there you go. Another use for the dryer sheet, earning its keep.
There you go.
But I thought it was a really interesting idea of writing, some sort of instructions because, the countermeasure my wife and I guess, have developed is like I do my laundry and she does her laundry.
Okay.
With very little overlap because I would be afraid of messing up, what can go through the dryer or what cycle or what. And so, that's been our countermeasure. But if we got to a point where she was asking me to do her laundry, I would totally use the dry erase marker trick.
Right.
And coach her, please give me some standardized work so I don't create any laundry defects. Because there are a lot of things that can go wrong with laundry.
Yeah. And a lot of my friends have kids. Our kids are 4-legged. So, but my friends that have 2-legged children, they talk about that all the time. So it's, a kid's jersey or something that needs to be washed from an equipment standpoint from, physical activity outside, whether it's soccer or baseball or football or whatever, but can't go in the dryer because, it's going to shrink or something bad will happen to it. Right. And it's simple. And that's really the key to the whole content of the book is all of this stuff is simple. I'm not telling you anything that is, you need a PhD to be able to do this, right? This is all just simple, common sense type of activities or things that you can do that are low to no cost. And that's the other aspect of it too, is that I think sometimes when they think of getting organized or doing improvements that they think it costs money, right? So they think that, we have to go to the Container Store or a place like that, or, read somebody else's book that talks about buying different things, that are expensive. And, I'm an advocate of, reuse if you have it, or, let's do something cheap, go to the dollar store. It doesn't have to be super expensive to do this. And that's at home and at work.
Yes, that is a classic continuous improvement lesson or a Kaizen lesson, however you want to put it. Creativity before capital, or mind over money, or use your mind before money. That's
right.
A great reminder. I mean, thinking to that section in the back on practical tips and tricks, is there one, Katie, that stands out to you as a favorite? If you were to share one trick with any household in America, what would you share?
I think the one that helps me the most, that I probably use the most, quite frankly, is the grocery list, right? And I have the grocery list segregated out. I have to say I come from a line of organized people. My family's very organized too. My parents actually have an Excel spreadsheet for the grocery store that lists all the items in what aisle it's in until they, change it again. So that little quick grocery list really helps to keep me organized when I go to the grocery store, because it drives me nuts just to have a list of things that I need. If I can put them in categories and segregate them, it's more likely I won't forget something. And that's really that's the whole key for something like that is to not forget whatever that unknown item may be.
Yeah. And even beyond the not forgetting, I'm thinking when I do grocery shopping, let's say if I've got 4 recipes that I'm planning out and I'm going to go do that shopping as a batch. And like some people may cringe. I'm like, hey, sometimes a batch is necessary and appropriate.
Yep.
Especially during COVID times, hey, let's minimize the risk of going to the grocery store by not going every single day, maybe. But yeah, I've been doing that for a while. So I have a list. I know the grocery store well enough. It's not by aisle number, but I know the first department I'm going to walk through is vegetables and produce. Right. So I will put everything from those different recipes or other things I know I need to buy into the produce category. And then there's like the dairy category, the meat category, the center of the store category, if you will. Right. And so then what that leads to is not having to double back and say, I got to walk all the way across the store because I need a cucumber.
Right. I know. I'm just saying that list is laid out the same way as the grocery store is, for the most part, like you said. And it does help you from, having to, the worst thing is to get to the other end of the store, right, and decide that you needed something from the vegetable aisle. So,
So yes, on the one hand, it's some additional steps that go on the Fitbit, but sometimes you don't have time for that, and you could save that inefficient grocery store time and turn that into real exercise.
Right. And my other favorite one is the red folder. So I'm sure you read in the book, it talks about using this plastic red folder that you could probably get for $1 or cheaper, or buy it in bulk on Amazon. This red folder I have used that technique for years. So in my life, I have had the privilege of traveling all over the world, and I don't like where things are just in random places in my bags and things like that. I want to quickly get to them. So it's a plastic, it happens to be red folder. And inside the folder are all my travel documents, anything that I may need for travel. So my boarding passes, things like that. And then I put my receipts in there. So when I come back from travel, depending on, what the logistics are of that, then I have all my receipts in one place instead of, did I put in my purse, my pocket, my coat, my backpack? Where did I put all this? We use it. I'm getting ready to go on a trip with one of our horses, and I have one of those inside our horse trailer. So if you've ever traveled with animals, you need to have certain documentation with you at all times. So that's inside the trailer in a red envelope. So it's very easily accessible. It stands out, right? The other reason it's red and plastic is the color and the texture, because I like to be able to go into my backpack without looking. I can just feel where's that red envelope and pull it out because the texture of it. So
we are birds of a feather, because I use a similar kind of plastic folder method.
There you go.
It folds over and, it kind of ties shut. But I think where I could improve upon my improvement is leveraging your idea of, I like the idea of the red folder, because then if it's coming down to a matter of visibility,
right,
there it is. So that's
Absolutely.
A great tip.
And it can work for anything. No, I was just going to say it can work for anything that you may need.
Yeah. One other example there that jumped out to me that I think can apply to the office setting or a work from home setting is the idea of color coding meetings. And so this is your idea, or I learned it from you. So can you share a little bit about that idea?
Absolutely. So it doesn't matter what email platform that you have. And we'll talk about a manual and I would say automated way would be by using a system, right? So I use Gmail and Outlook, and every system allows you to do this, but I color code my meetings and my calendars. So any meeting that, is a one-on-one like this will be a green color. And maybe I have a personal meeting on Friday. Maybe I have a doctor's appointment. I put that in my calendar and I color it purple. Anytime I have a Kaizen event, I have that in red. So when I open my calendar, I always open my calendar on Sunday, and obviously I look through it during the week, but I can be able to quickly distinguish and see what's happening during the week. You can expand this to beyond your calendar. You can do this for your emails. So I have folders in Gmail that are a specific color based on what topic I'm talking about or I want to file. You can do this also in Outlook. So if you use Outlook, an incoming mail, let's say every incoming mail from Mark, I want it to be green. You can put in a rule in place so that it highlights that email coming into your inbox in green. So you can automatically see, maybe I want to make sure that I read Mark's first, or, you can color it in red if it happens to be a particular situation where it comes from a particular group. Maybe it's a system warning, something like that. Very quick and easy to be able to do. If you don't know how to do it, just honestly Google it, because there are multiple ways to be able to do this, but it makes you so much more efficient.
Yeah, and whether that's Mac and the Apple ecosystem, or Gmail or Outlook, there are different ways of addressing that similar issue.
Yep. Use the colors. Like I said in the book, I think I am the only person that ever had an entire group of individuals that work for me that were completely colorblind, but hopefully you are able to see color and be able to utilize that too.
Just one of the many issues with red-green color coding of metrics.
You got it.
Not me, but other men who
Yes.
tend to be more likely to be red-green colorblind than women.
Absolutely. So you have to take that into account, right? And not everybody raises their hand when they say, "Hi, welcome to my team," or "Welcome, I'm coming onto your team and I'm colorblind." You have to be able to work from there to make sure the metrics are understandable, even if they happen to be published in black and white, right? You have to make sure you understand it, make those understandable.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a meeting last week, and we were using an online whiteboarding tool that I know you mentioned in your book is one of many that can be helpful, Miro. Mm-hmm. And there was some color coding of the virtual Post-it notes, and I think it was like difference between pink and purple. And somebody actually spoke up and sort of verbally pulled the andon cord, if you will, and he said, "To me, these all look blurple." Was the color that he was describing. So, we had to adjust and adapt. But
absolutely not hard to do.
One other thing I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned, this virtual world that we've been working in for this last year, and I think we'll probably continue even if we're in more hybrid modes. We're going to have a lot more remote work. Are there any particular lessons that come to mind, kind of thinking back now to the workplace of facilitating or leading improvement or working with people in a virtual meeting mode, ideas that you found helpful in terms of improving how you do that?
Sure. First of all, at the beginning of a meeting, have everybody turn their cameras on. It's really, I can speak for myself, Mark, I'm sure you can speak for yourself too. It's really hard to have a meeting when you're just staring at a black screen with names under boxes. That's really difficult. So one of the things that I do suggest is, even though people may feel reluctant, by now we've seen everybody's cat, kid, dog, everything that is happening in the background.
Do you ever have a horse run by behind you? Probably no. Not. You shouldn't have a horse in the house, right?
Nope. But I have a cat that likes to meow outside my door, though, while I'm on podcasts. So, but it's first of all making sure that everybody can be seen. And then understanding your audience, right? So going back to the concept that we all know, voice of the customer, and making sure that you understand how they prefer to interact. So if you do ask questions, instead of sitting here going, Bueller, is anybody going to respond to me? Understand that maybe they really like the chat feature. And how can we use that? How can we put people in breakout rooms? That has been a really popular topic lately with folks, is that they'd like to be in a breakout room, and then making sure you understand how to manage those, right? So that they can know that they can ask for help and you can pop in and out. And then of course, using technology that makes it feel like we're together. And it's not just using Zoom or GoToMeeting or anything like that. I'm talking about technology like Miro, which is what, Mark, you were just talking about, Miro.com, Mural.com, Whiteboard on Teams. It makes it feel like we're actually there together. You can see people's name hovering around when they're moving their cursor and they're picking up a sticky note. I have done these sessions now numerous times, and that's, out of everything that I've been teaching and the interactions I've been having, people like that the most.
Yeah. So one other thing, Katie, before we wrap up, this kind of comes back now to workplace issues. What are some of your thoughts about, as we're working with people and engaging people, the phrase, and I think it's always a loaded phrase, resistance to change comes up. And I know you have some thoughts I'd like you to share for the audience on lessons that you've learned about motivations, and when we're sensing this resistance, what does that tell us? What should we or what could we do in those circumstances?
Sure. So obviously there's a lot of fear that goes along with change and resistance to change. There's a couple of things that I suggest. First of all, knowing what that person values, right? What do they value? And I talk about in the book, some people value time, other people value money, other people value sleep, right? So what does that person value when they're resisting to change? And then making sure that you understand what's driving that resistance. Many times it's because they feel like they're not part of the solution, right? So they kind of feel like they're standing on the sidelines and they're not part of that actual solution. So you want to make sure that you can engage them and make sure that they can become a part of it. And then, of course, understanding how they learn too. So if you are telling a group of people over Zoom that we're going to make all these changes at our company and we're going to go forth and we're going to do that, and you're just speaking to them, maybe that person learns better by actually seeing something on the screen. So, we don't want to do death by PowerPoint, but sometimes people just need bullet points to be able to relate to. So making sure that we understand that sometimes they're kinesthetic learners. So they need to be able to understand by doing. So you could use one of the technologies we've already talked about, but getting their engagement, getting their buy-in, getting them curious, right? Getting people curious about what's around the next corner is really what you're trying to do. How can we make this better? And kind of making you're not making it a game necessarily, but you're making a game of it where we're saying, how much better could we be? What great things can we accomplish together? And then celebrating those accomplishments, which is hard right now in our virtual world because, Mark, you and I can't go out for coffee to celebrate this, right? That just doesn't exist right now. So figuring out other ways that people like to be celebrated. And I know a lot of people have tried, after hours Zoom coffee chats or Zoom cocktails. That works for some. For other people, it may be just, sending them an email and saying, thanks, you did a great job. This is fantastic. Or, virtual gift cards still work today. Amazon it's probably going crazy. And we already know they're going crazy, yeah. Right? But, people appreciate that when they can't leave the house, or Uber Eats or something like that too.
Yeah, the virtual Amazon gift card as a thank you may have superseded the old default, which was the Starbucks gift card.
I know. I agree.
But now, maybe that'll shift back. People are going to crave. People are craving those physical experiences and those physical interactions. So it's good that we're getting back to that. So I'm glad. I mean, heck, my podcasts have always been a virtual interaction. And one thing about the pandemic here is it's less likely that a podcast guest doesn't know how to use Zoom.
That's true.
That is far less education taking place around getting the Zoom set up and running and all. So, Katie, I really want to thank you. I'm going to thank you verbally here in front of the audience. Thank you for taking time and for being a guest today and having the discussion. Our guest again has been Katie Labedz. Her book is How to Improve Absolutely Anything, Continuous Improvement in Your Home, Office, and Family Life. And for those of you watching on YouTube, show the logo on your polo shirt. Your hair is a little bit in the way. Yep. See the Learning to Lean logo, and the website Katie has for that is learningtolean.training. And I'll make sure there are links to that, the Michigan Lean Consortium, michiganlean.org. I guess that best ways for people to contact you if they want to learn more. The book is certainly available on Amazon, and I don't have it handy. There's a website for the book, which is howtoimproveabsolutelyanything.com. Same tag for social media. You can follow me on Facebook. You can reach out to me on Facebook or any social media, or on my webpage. My email is info@learningtolean.training. But love to be able to talk to you. All right. Well, good. I hope people will reach out. I hope people will check out the book and give it a read. This idea of, when people get excited about lean and they start applying it to things in their own home, like that melts away some of this. Like they may be labeled as resistant to change at work when, as you were saying a minute ago, there's far more to it than that. But then they'll go home and do things because it's self-initiated, of their own self-interest and self-benefit. These people aren't resistant to change. Maybe they're just not engaged the right way in the workplace. So
absolutely.
I love these examples, and I'm really thankful that you did your book. So congratulations for that. And thanks you again, Mark, for being here as my guest.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate being here.
Well, thanks again to Katie for being a great guest. You can learn more about her work and her book. You can find links by going to leanblog.org/408. Thank you for subscribing. Please rate and review the podcast. And if you like the podcast, the best thing you can do is to share it with others. Please share the episode on social media. Please tag me and Katie, especially if you share it on LinkedIn. That's going to help more people learn about Katie's book. And thank you again for spreading and sharing what we're doing here on the podcast.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.